Mario Fantano here, America's internet's favorite recording analog snobby dude or whatever, and in today's video, I'm going to try to convince you to ditch the DAW once again and join the analog dark side. And as they say, once you ditch the DAW, you learn to take it raw. Now, in all seriousness, today's video is just going to be an argument of why I don't use plugins and I instead use analog gear. I hope I can convince you to at least try an analog piece of gear. I'm not trying to get you to completely change your recording practices as a whole, but maybe I give you a little bite here and you want to take a little bit more than a nibble next time and you get into analog gear because it's fun and stuff and the reasons I'm going to say, etc., etc. Now, I already recorded this video and it was a haphazard ranting mess, and I think you guys want a little more structure, so we're going to try this again. Now, in all my videos, I do enjoy your guys' opinions and feedback, even though most of the time they f***ing suck. But for this one especially, you know, I love to hear your guys' opinion about recording. So, you know, fucking comment, whatever, yell at me, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so let's just get on with it. There's got to be a gigantic disclaimer before we move on this video. Your boy over here has personally never used a plugin. I know, I'm making a whole video about plugins, and I've never even used one. I've talked about it ad nauseum in my videos before. I've used a DAW for like 15 minutes at most to record my first song. It repulsed me immediately, and I ran to Craigslist and bought a tape machine and been in love with tape recording ever since. Now, this video is not just about fucking tape recording. You know, I record on at least HT24. That's not tape. That's digital format. I just like the hands-on, non-computer type of recording. Now, the only reason I'm mentioning that is because you gotta realize this whole video is going to be deep fried in my bias. Deep fucking Burger King fried bias, okay? So, just keep that in mind, and we're gonna move on. Ah, shit. God damn it. First of all, what the fuck is that? I don't know who put that there, but it won't me. Now, let me tell you what this video ain't gonna be about, okay? It is certainly not gonna be about the sound differences between using a plugin and the analog hardware equivalent. My God, there's thousands of videos on YouTube doing A/B comparisons. It's such a tired debate. I'll settle it right here. You can't tell a motherfucking difference between the two, okay? You have to have a really keen set of ears, and you have to be listening on a really stellar set of speakers or stellar set of headphones to even notice the difference. It's just, that argument is so annoying, okay? More importantly, do you think the listener of your song gives a fuck whether or not you used a plugin or an analog piece of hardware? They don't give a fuck. They just care if your song is good or not, okay? And, you know, plugins are going to be plenty fine of getting you where you need to be. So, for this whole kind of argument I'm going to be making here, don't take it from that perspective. Take it from a home recordist's enjoyment of using their gear and learning to record music and just enjoying the process and being a hobbyist. I have said it ad nauseum in my videos. We are amateurs, and the Latin root for that word is for love or to love or whatever the fuck it is, I forget, and we're doing it for the love of it. We're not doing music recording for the money. Most people watching this, right? So that really frees us up and gives us so much more creative control than someone who does this for a living. We are able to prioritize the enjoyment factor of using analog gear or using a plugin, whatever. So, at the end of the day, it really, everything I'm about to say in a second, it's just fucking, disregard it. Whatever you enjoy, fucking do that shit. Okay, so now let's actually get into the pros and cons here. Fuck, man, why the fuck are all my stands breaking today? God fucking damn it. Let's be honest here. If you want a stellar product, baby, just throw on a plugin. It's going to get you just where you need to be. Plugins are obviously going to be way more accessible than pieces of gear. You could literally download any plugin you want at the snap of a finger. You don't have to worry about the physical space that, you know, actual gear is going to take up. It's all going to be fit onto your tiny little laptop or whatever you're using. There is no maintenance associated with plugins, even though I think that's a pretty minor factor. You shouldn't have to do too much maintenance once you get stuff set up. There's no noise floor. I mean, that's a big one. With some of the cheap gear, especially the super cheap gear I have, I mean, the noise floor is ridiculous. I talk about it all the time. The noise floor on this Fostex spring reverb is a joke. I mean, it's disgustingly loud. So that's kind of a big one there. What else? Look at my idiot sheep. Another pro that I don't really think is a pro, but I think some people might think it's a pro, is that you'll be able to sound like everyone else out there on the internet. There's going to be billions of videos where you can watch how to set up your plugin. There's going to be presets already baked into the plugin. It's all going to be very replicatable. What's the word? Repeatable, right? So, look, if you want to sound like everybody else, plugins are a great way to do that. And for the last pro, I'm not actually convinced it's true. On the onset, I thought plugins would be cheaper than analog gear, but I'm not actually convinced of that. Sure, if you're trying to get the analog equivalent of whatever plugin you're getting, 100%. You could obviously get a plugin for devices that are, $30,000. But I'm talking about real analog gear that the Joe Schmo can buy. Most of the stuff's $50 to $100. Over the long course of recording music over decades, I mean, that's not that much. Think about it. If you're recording on a computer, you have to buy a new computer, at least every 5 years? Those things are thousands of dollars, right? Plugins are not that cheap. Some of them are pretty expensive, so I'm not totally convinced that it's cheaper, but there's some argument there. I don't think it's worth really spending too much time talking about it, so let's move on. Alright, so we just went through the reasons why you would want to record with the plugin. Now let's get to the fun part of the video, where I explain how analog recording is going to make your dick grow 3 inches. Now, I'm going to start with the most important thing in my eyes of why I would recommend someone getting an analog piece of gear. And it's really going to come down to the beginning learning curve of being a recording engineer. I guarantee you're going to learn a hell of a lot quicker using an analog piece of gear versus a computer to learn. Now let's start with compressors and compression. When you're a beginner, the theory of compression is pretty easy to understand. In practice, however, and how you utilize compression, I think is not so easy to grasp as a beginner, and it takes some time to understand what it's doing and why you want it to do what it's doing. And the problem with a DAW is that it relies too much on the visuals of the waveform, and I've seen this a lot, where people are just looking at what they think the waveform should look like rather than what it should sound like. And we cannot forget that music is an aural format, A-U-R-A-L, and at the end of the day, our ears should be doing all the thinking. Now, an analog piece of gear isn't completely devoid from a visual aspect. On a compressor, there is the dB reduction meter, so you do use that as a tool. However, it relies much less on the visual aspect. Additionally, there's going to be 0 lag time associated with analog gear. Now, if you have a song and it's loaded up with 50 plugins and it's chained this and that and this and that and that, it takes a lot of processing power to do all that stuff. And if you have a nice computer, sure, that lag time might be minimized, but when you are changing settings, even the minute lag time that you're experiencing, it's going to be harder for you to understand what manipulations you are doing on your piece of gear are actually having to the end result. Having that instantaneous feedback while you're moving a knob, physically moving a knob, is really crucial to understanding how you're affecting the sound. Second thing is, on the computer, you're probably only going to have one single finger to be able to control something. Kind of. There's obviously some wiggle room there. But with an analog piece of gear, most of the time you got 2 fingers, and a lot of the times that's really important for one, the learning aspect, but two, just for mixing aspect. Riding the volume fader while you're changing the gain of your compressor, stuff like that. It's much easier to do that on an infinitesimally small scale compared to a computer. A computer is going to be, you might be able to have more control, but in the moment when you're mixing, it's not as easy to do. And I think mixing especially, it's all in the moment. It's all minor things that you're doing that are incremental, and it's to me, I just find it much quicker and easier to learn that way. The second reason I'm going to suggest getting an analog piece of gear to record with is because you are going to have a limited set of tools. Now, I know at first that might seem like a con, but I'm telling you, I really do not think it is at all. As I say in all of my videos, limitations are a good thing, especially in home recording. From a learning perspective as well, you are going to learn much, much more quicker when you only have one single piece of gear to learn on. Let's take an example of compressors once again. You think, okay, I have access to plugins, I have access to thousands of different compressor plugins and presets, and I'll be able to find a preset that works perfectly for the source I'm working on. Sure, that's great. I know for a fact you will be able to do that. However, you're not going to be forced to actually learn how to use compression. You're just going to be using presets and changing this and trying that and trying this, trying that, right? Versus you starting off with one compressor you buy and use that for every track. You are going to learn how that compressor, how the attack time works, how the release time works, how the ratio works. You're going to learn all of that really well on that piece of equipment, and you'll be able to translate that to new pieces of equipment very quickly. Microphones are a great example of this. Now, I know, are there plugins for microphones? Someone Google that for me. Are there plugins for microphones? I'm sure there is. It's a plugin for everything. At first, what's going to be better? If you have one microphone or a cabinet full of 50 microphones? You might think, once again, I have 50 microphones. I'll be able to find the perfect microphone for that guitar cabinet. Sure, you're going to find a good microphone eventually. However, if you have one microphone, you're going to learn a lot more about microphone placement. You're going to learn a lot more about pickup patterns. You're going to learn how to change the settings on your amps to get the sound you want, right? You're going to learn how to use your gear a lot more rather than just plugging and chugging until you find something that works. Limitations are good. Okay, next thing. I should also mention that with a limited set of gear, you are going to be forced to do bounce downs. And once again, I think this is a crucial tool to learn recording engineering as a beginner. Let's take, for example, you have a 16-track song. You have 8 tracks of that you want to have compression on it. If you have one compressor, you're going to have to treat all those tracks independently, and you're going to be analyzing the tracks alone and then in the context of the full mix. And you're going to have to do a lot of thinking, a lot of committing, and you're going to learn much more succinctly rather than just throwing 10 plugins at a time on 10 separate tracks and just hoping for the best. All right, now we're really moving on to the next point. The next reason is, once again, going to seem like a detriment, but you're going to have to trust me on this one. You are not going to be able to recall settings with an analog piece of gear. Now, this can be a pain in the ass, I admit, especially if you're jumping from song to song to song to song to song. Comes a pain in the ass, it can be time consuming. However, I really do think that this helps you take every song from a really analytical approach. You're always going to be approaching it from a fresh set of ears if you have to start from scratch when you're doing your mixing. Now, not all the time you're starting complete from the scratch. There's, I write down my settings a lot. I have things set up on my board that they're always the same. For example, my second auxiliary send always goes to my one compressor that is always used for drum compression. So, each song's going to be the same. I know all this gear really well, so I know immediately what's probably going to work on, say, vocal track or guitar track, right? So, it's not as time consuming as you would think. It's not like I'm starting from complete scratch. However, I think sometimes when you're mixing a song and, something's not quite sitting right, you're not happy with it, and it's because you get set down these rabbit holes, right, where your track's set a certain way, whether EQ, compression, the volume, whatever the case may be. And because it's been set like that for days, you just get used to it. You don't realize that's what's wrong. And then when you go at the song with a fresh set of ears, maybe 2 weeks later, you start looking at it from a totally different perspective. You try something different, you put a different effect on, whatever the case may be. Starting from a fresh slate, so to speak, can be really beneficial for that. Hopefully you can understand where I'm coming from. It's really being unburdened by what has been. I don't know why I just said that. All right, let's move on. The fourth reason I'm going to suggest an analog piece of gear is because it might stop you from overproducing your song. I have seen some crazy plug-in chains on people's DAWs where they're just throwing every effect known to man on the track. And generally speaking, this is a huge generalization, but generally with music recording, you want your source track to be as unmanipulated as possible. The better you get it in the room correctly with the microphone and the instrument and, limited manipulation, it's most likely going to be better. It's going to sound more natural. The listener is going to connect with it a little easier. Of course, there's going to be circumstances where you want to do some severe manipulation. Listen, I love garage rock. There's some, severe manipulation at times. But generally, once again, the less you do, the better. When you have a limited set of gear, you're not going to be just throwing on plugin after plugin after plugin until you think you get something that you like. People ask me for advice on their mixes a lot of the times, and most of the time, the reason something doesn't sound quite right is I do think it sounds overproduced, and it sounds almost robotic and computerized and kind of just loses that natural musical sense. The fifth reason is going to be instant reading and manipulation of settings and tracks. When you're working on the analog realm, everything is right at your disposal. Every setting that you're using, how many dBs of reduction your vocal compressor is getting, what tracks are muted, where their volumes are at, what your EQs are looking like, it's all right there, all instantaneous. Your screen is this big. It is your whole life. Right now, on the contrary, if you're working with plugins, in a worst case scenario, you could be working on a little laptop screen, right? And sure, you will be able to access all this information. However, it's not going to be as quick. It's not going to be as instantaneous. Sometimes you're going to have to go to a different page and see how everything is routed. And maybe there's folders and you have to scroll to find the track you want. That's all time, right? Mixing is an extremely iterative process. You're doing a bunch of minor things and tweaking things and going back and A-B comparisons and this and that. I start doing the hand jive when I'm mixing, okay? When it's all right there, it is so it just feels so natural. And I think the one thing people get really scared about is they don't know how they're going to be able to route stuff in the analog realm. It seems really daunting, but I guarantee you it is a lot simpler to use analog gear than DAW recording. It's so simple. The input of one thing to the output the other thing, right? That's it. That's literally it. It's extremely simple. I'm not going to get into it right now, but all right. Next thing, all right. The next one is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. Really, I'm getting really damn tired of this subscription-based world we are turning into. Everything's a subscription. Everything. You want to use the ice maker in your refrigerator? Too bad, subscription. Oh, you want that last bit of toothpaste in your toothpaste roll? Subscription. Oh, you want your girlfriend to jerk you off? Subscription. Everything is a subscription, and I'm tired of it. And I don't think plugins are there quite yet. They might be. I'm not even sure. But if they aren't, they are eventually going to be. If you don't think that's true, it's going to happen. Everything's subscription these days. Blinkers in cars have subscriptions, okay? It's inevitable. It's going to happen. Analog gear, you don't got to worry about it. Once you buy it, it's yours. You don't have to pay no man, no nothing, right? If you treat this stuff well, it will last you decades without a problem, okay? I love it. I love owning my own, okay? And another thing is, this stuff, extreme backwards compatibility. You don't have to worry about no software updates or not working with the new iteration of Reaper or Reason, whatever the hell. This stuff's going to work moving on with all audio equipment. Quarter-inch plugs, RCAs, XLRs, they ain't going nowhere. That stuff is tried and true, and it's going to be continuing to be tried and true. I love it. That's it. Okay, next thing. The last reason that I like to record on the analog pieces of gear is because I like to take pride in the things I own. For some people, that's going to be different things, or many things. Some people, like us, it's going to be our guitar. Maybe it's the shoes you wear. Maybe it's the car you drive, the camera you shoot, whatever. You like taking pride in the things you have. I'm really one of those people. I love my possessions. I like taking good care of them. I like using them. I like showing them off. I love things, okay? And an analog piece of gear, this stuff is so fun. Let's talk about my first piece of outboard gear. That was this CL52E here, this compressor. I've talked about it a lot. That piece of gear has been on every single song I've ever recorded, except the first two. I bought that after my second song that I recorded. I love that thing. There's nothing special about it. At times it sounds like crap, but I love it. It's almost become tradition at this point, right? It's become a piece of me. It's become my sound, right? I've like developed my sound with this gear, right? It's not the same plug-in sound that everyone else is going to have, right? You start taking pride in this stuff. You start growing attached to it. There's nostalgia. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Like, I love this stuff. It's almost like family. I don't know. Is that stupid? Maybe. But I just don't think you get that same connection to piece of software. It's just not the same. You know what I'm saying? And look, not like I said, none of this stuff is special. None of these pieces of gear, besides maybe this Space Echo here, is like special, right? And I don't know. I still love all of it. I love all of it. So I don't know, man. Hopefully you understand what I'm saying. I think that's the end of this video. I think the first time I recorded this video where I was just ranting was way better. but I was trying to do more structured and kind of loses its pizzazz. Anyway, hopefully you guys liked it, and I want to hear your opinions. And look what I got. There might be some fun stuff happening soon. You like that? You like that? You see where that's going? That's exciting. We're going to be having a video on that. Let's go through my edit sheet. I probably forgot something. Oh, yeah. I remember what I was going to say. Okay, we'll end the video on this. This is the rant part. We're getting to the rant part. So, I've said this before, and I think it was the video about when I was talking about tape recording versus not tape recording. You know, I really do equate analog music recording to analog photography, right? The similarities are so just glaring. And, you know, I've been shooting film for, I don't know, more than a decade at this point. I've really rarely ever shot digital. And the reasons I like to shoot film has nothing to do with the reproduction factor, right? Same thing that goes with music recording. The reason I like the recording on tape is not because it reproduces the sounds better than it would digitally, right? Like, you could easily make the argument that digital recording and digital photography is going to be able to recreate what you want a lot better and be more versatile. It's, you know, that's not why. The reason I do it is because of the process, right? It's way more enjoyable to take a picture on film than it is to take a digital picture. It's like a magic element to it, right? When you click the shutter and you know you took a picture that's now on a negative, I don't know, man. There's really something magical about it that I think just cannot be replicated. It has nothing to do with better or worse, or I don't know, man. How's that for a rant? That was pretty, you know, that was nothing. I could have kept going, but listen, it's late. I gotta eat dinner, and I've said enough. All right. Okay.
Hi, SpongeBob. The SpongeBob. Who's SpongeBob? I said SpongeBob. Again. Sorry, people.